everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the UnifyHub podcast. Today's topic is feedback, specifically toxic and non-toxic communication. My name is Emma, and I'm an English and German teacher here at UnifyHub, and I'm joined by my colleague Brandon. And we've both lived and worked in different countries. So I, for example, have lived in Austria. I've worked in Austria and Poland. So we also hope to share with you our personal experiences of communication within a sort of cultural and international context as well. So I guess we should start by considering the question, what does the word toxic mean? Maybe some of you will know it from the Britney Spears song, but Brandon, if we think about the word toxic, how could we really define this word?
I definitely think being toxic has a lot to do with a person's intentions and how frequently these intentions are used to create a negative atmosphere. So generally someone negative who intentionally spreads that negativity.
Yeah, exactly. And also maybe we should think about the difference between impolite and toxic. So if a boss or an employer is being really rude to you, at what point is it impolite and at what point does it become something toxic? How do you think we could distinguish the difference there?
I definitely think that when someone is simply impolite, it's just definitely a part of their personality, the way they are. Maybe they're being professional, but not exactly in a very sweet way, right? But someone who is toxic, it definitely has a stronger, as I said before, an intention behind it. And it's something that they don't even try to control. And it comes out in moments when it's extremely inappropriate. And I think that definitely if you're in the situation where you've had to deal with these type of people, you can feel that there's a difference in the way these people communicate when they're maybe just a little impolite, so maybe they don't always say please and thank you, but can otherwise be respectful, whereas a toxic person will certainly more forcefully spread their, as I said before, like their negative attitude and be a little more aggressive in how they approach things.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all about the intention. Are they meaning to be rude? Are they meaning to come across in this passive-aggressive way? And this is something we'll be talking about later on as well. It's probably important to note at this point as well, the cultural context is really important. Some cultures consider direct feedback completely okay, whereas for other cultures, this is something a bit strange and they might, feel a bit upset or a bit defensive about this. And also the tone, the intonation, the way in which this feedback is given is really important as well. So maybe we'll move on to our first question, and it's how do cultural differences influence what is considered toxic or non-toxic feedback? And with my business English students recently, we've been discussing the book, The Culture Map, Breaking Through the Invisible Boundaries of Global Business, by the author and business professor Erin Meyer. And in it, she talks about these cultural differences, about how where we were raised, where we work, can really influence how we perceive feedback. And a good example of this is, for example, British people often say that the French are always late, they're really disorganized in business, whereas on the other hand, Indian business people often say that the French are actually overly structured and they're very inadaptable. So you can really see that the opinion of this feedback can be completely different depending on the cultural context and the country where you are residing.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And I think the main thing that has come up for me and that I've discussed with some of my local students is definitely the use of small talk in business situations. It's definitely something that is expected in many Western contexts, for example, Western Europe, maybe North America, Latin America. Small talk is not only not valued, but not expected. And when this kind of clash occurs, sometimes there can be a little bit of misunderstanding. And, for many of us from certain other cultural contexts, it's a very important way to kind of get the ball rolling when we're in a business situation, just to kind of warm everyone up and get everyone kind of on the same page, so to speak. So I definitely think this slight cultural misunderstanding leads some people to sometimes feel a little uncomfortable, maybe on both sides.
not just communication in terms of business, in terms of the content of your, business project, but also those bits between the meetings, on the way to the meeting, after the meeting. How do you engage with your colleagues on a personal level as well? Yeah, super. So I think this leads us on to our next question, which is maybe a little bit more lighthearted. And it is, if toxic feedback were a character in a comedy movie, what catchphrase would they use? So I have some more, let's say, general examples. So often when you're writing an email, you could say something like, as per my previous email. And I've often used this if I've already emailed somebody several times, they're still not replying to me. Just saying something like that to highlight the fact that you've already mentioned this can be quite a good idea. Another one that I quite like is with all due respect. Because it doesn't specify the amount of respect that it's due. Maybe there's no respect due. Maybe you don't respect this person. But it can be a sort of slightly almost passive aggressive way of dealing with the situation. And then along with that, we have some quite, general, generic examples. As I told you, as I've mentioned, these can all be quite useful in a business context. But I think, Brandon, you have maybe some more funny examples from a very famous movie that lots of people will have heard of.
Definitely. Anytime I hear about a toxic workplace, the first thing I think about is The Devil Wears Prada. And I've had a lot of students who've seen this film. They've enjoyed it. It's really funny. And I always think about the part when the two main characters first meet, Meryl Streep's character and Anne Hathaway's character, and Anne Hathaway gives what she feels is a very earnest and honest response to what she thought was an invitation to share her opinion, and Meryl Streep's character very, very directly informs her, no, that wasn't a question. So, basically in a very impolite and quite aggressive manner telling her that her thoughts were completely unimportant and unwelcome and to be quiet. I remember also another part in the film where after they had been working together for a little bit, and Anne Hathaway's character again thought that she had a normal and polite relationship with her boss, and she started to ask for some specifics on a task that she was given, and once again Meryl Streep, in a very toxic way, of course, says, please bore someone else with your questions. So I hope that many of our listeners will not have had these types of encounters with either bosses or colleagues, but it can happen sometimes that, again, this is about the intention behind the statement, and clearly Meryl Streep's character had a very negative intention to make Anne Hathaway's character feel very small and very ashamed of herself. So I think we all know the movie turned out to be a little happier in the end, but these were definitely some uncomfortable moments.
Yeah, exactly. So we could say that this type of behavior is definitely toxic, quite intimidating, and also passive aggressive, or in Meryl Streep's character's case, maybe even aggressive without the passive. But this is something we can definitely consider in the context of conflict resolution in the workplace. If you have something, a particular point that is, maybe really stressing your team out, it's a very sort of difficult issue within your project. Sometimes some of these sort of toxic comments, toxic feedback can come out. So how could we make our communication less toxic? Maybe just using the simple word please, adding some phrases like, could you please, would you be able to, is it possible that, I'm afraid, I don't think this is the right way to do this. Something like this can really help to maybe just lighten the tone and make your communication a little bit less direct. And in the world of English language learning, we call this hedging or tentative language. And it's something that's particularly quite popular with British business people. Could you possibly reply to this email when you maybe have some time? But I'm interested to know, maybe with Brandon, are there some differences that you think between the American business communication and the British business communication? What would you say about this?
Yeah, I definitely feel that we both engage in this, as you said, hedging and kind of language and adding these phrases. Americans also take it a step further. I think we like to sugarcoat things. We use a lot of emotive language. We are very generous with superlatives. So, even if something isn't very remarkable, we may be very excited. Oh, this is amazing. That's spectacular. It's amazing that I can meet with you at 3 p.m. today. So we do tend to get very energetic and expressive, even in kind of everyday daily activities. And I think that in many American workplaces, this is kind of an expected form of communication and behavior. And when it's absent, sometimes that can also lead to misunderstandings and misinterpretations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So where American colleague might say, "Oh, that's awesome, that's amazing," your British colleague might say something like, "That's not too bad." So definitely a difference in the emotions and the way of expressing our emotions. Exactly. Yeah, good. So this leads us quite nicely onto our third discussion question. And what's the quirkiest? Quirky means something like strange or odd, a little bit funny. What's the quirkiest compliment you've ever given or received as part of feedback? And Brandon, I think you have an example maybe from one of your own students, maybe where you've praised them for possibly some more unusual or slightly random vocab choices.
Yeah, there's been a few cases where students may not recognize an everyday word like, faucet on the sink or something like this, but then somehow they are able to easily pull out a word. I had a student who used the word heteronormative in a conversation. We were talking about a film, and and also there was another situation where a student was able to even explain to me, the native speaker, what is a goulash. Again, this idea that in a cultural context, someone may recognize something and another person may not. So, those of us from warmer climates with more temperate weather may not need something like a goulash, which is I guess a shoe you would wear when it rains a lot, right? So if you need to splash through a lot of mud puddles and things, it could be really useful. But if you live somewhere where there's not a lot of rain, like in the desert, or again, like a less rainy climate, it's not really an article of clothing that you'll really need. So when I was very proud of my student to explain these shoes to me and remind me that this word exists in English, because in places I've lived, it hasn't really, thankfully up until now, been something that I've really needed. So it was really nice. I was really excited, and I tried to make this student feel really good. I was like, today you've taught the teacher. Congratulations.
Yeah, exactly. So it's always nice where a student can teach us something, or where we can, praise them for something that's a little bit more specific, unusual, as a word choice. Exactly. And maybe moving on to some more personal examples from, compliments we've received ourselves. So often I've received, especially at school, what we call backhanded compliments. These are compliments that, they are maybe intended as a compliment, but sometimes there's a little bit of a negative undertone. So for example, you're not very good at taking compliments, because I think I would maybe get a bit defensive, or like, oh, no, I'm not that good, really. I would try to, be a people pleaser. Or sometimes maybe a teacher would tell me, you're not a very good liar. I know you haven't done the homework. You're just lying to me. So something like this, where they are sort of trying to compliment, but it's a bit of a joke, and it can be perceived a little bit negatively as well sometimes. So Brandon, I think you have a good example of a slightly odd compliment that you received.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely have done a few different types of jobs and have gotten feedback from all of my managers, always positive. And one of the times I was given this positive feedback, it definitely came in the form of a backhanded compliment. And let's just say I was really good at handling touchy situations, difficult situations with some of our vendors and sometimes even some of our customers. And so if I needed to get get something from these people. Sometimes, let's just say I had some very harsh negotiating tactics that I would use, and my manager was very happy because we got the results we needed. We got the terms that we needed to make everything in our favor. And so my manager told me, you're really a pit bull, Brandon. And it's not always nice to be referred to as this kind of aggressive, mean dog, but it was definitely meant in a good way. He was very happy with my work. And I always think about that and laugh, because otherwise I don't like to think I'm a very vicious dog.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe we should see it as something positive. They were thinking you were hounding the investors. Yeah, you were pursuing them, you were following them up, or your negotiating or haggling skills were, very successful. So, maybe a slightly odd way of putting it, but hopefully they meant it in a positive way. And another example would be what we call geeking or nerding out. So if somebody is very enthusiastic about a specific interest, if they have a very specific ability, maybe we could compliment our colleague because of this ability, because of this specialized skill or contribution. And I found some quite funny examples of this. So you could say something like, you know your way around a spreadsheet. So this means, someone is very good at dealing with the facts, the figures, organizing their information. Do you have any other funny examples, Brandon?
Yeah, I like the expression I've heard here, for example, you bring so much to the table, we need a bigger table. Like you want to get more room for this person to shine, to show off their skills, to obviously make all the projects work better. And I do like the idea of telling someone, you're a geek and that's good, it shows expertise. I appreciate this kind of again, like you said, a backhanded compliment. It's a great way to very naturally compliment people and encourage them to continue with the things they're strong in.
Yeah, exactly. And, recognize people's, special sort of skills as well. There was another funny compliment I found, which is you're like a Wi-Fi signal, strong, reliable, and missed when you're not around. And maybe if you, most of you will know maybe a very reliable colleague that's always there for you. And when they're missing in that meeting or that project, you can really feel that loss. You really feel, we've lost our person that keeps us going. So this could be quite a sort of funny or quirky way to compliment a colleague as well. Yeah, super. So this leads us quite nicely into our fourth and final question. And it's, how would you give constructive feedback to a friend who always tells the same joke over and over again? And for this, I thought of a few funny examples. So you may have heard of the phrase "long time no see." If you've, you jokingly say that you haven't seen someone for a long time. So why not long time no hear? Yeah, you want to jokingly say, I think I've heard that joke many times, long time no hear. Or maybe something like, I haven't heard that one in a while, but in a very, what we call sarcastic, ironic way, because obviously you've probably heard this joke a lot of times. And Brandon, I think you have another example of this.
Yeah, my favorite is always to tell someone, that was really funny the first 100 times you said it. So, just gently reminding them that this isn't the first time I've heard this particular joke. And, maybe it's a good time to move on to something new, but in a nice, kind of playful way, obviously.
Exactly, yeah. And when we sort of make these comments, sometimes it doesn't have to be a whole sentence, a whole phrase. Sometimes it might be what we call sarcasm, wit. When you're making a funny joke, you're saying something that is the opposite of what you mean. An ironic expression perhaps, but sometimes it can simply be a vocalization, just a sound that we make. So I think, Brandon, we came up with quite a good example amongst ourselves. What did we say we could say in this situation?
Oh, my favorite is the fake laugh when you just go ha ha ha. It's always my go-to. Again, like if I've heard something over and over, or if it's a charming but not very funny joke, then I feel like this is a good way to show, okay, I appreciate your effort, but again, maybe try something different the next time.
Yeah, exactly. And this sort of vocalization, these sort of sounds, they're very sort of popular in maybe sort of sitcoms, situational comedies. And I'm sure many of our listeners, our students, will have seen some of these shows, like maybe the Big Bang Theory, some of these other sitcoms, from America, where there are these what we call running gags, a sort of joke that is used over and over again, an overused motif, perhaps. And I think, Brandon, maybe from some sitcoms and cartoons that you've watched, can you think of maybe any running gags or overused jokes that come to mind?
Oh, definitely. So I'm a big fan of the classic Family Guy, and one of the overused running gags, actually, that was something that was kind of funny for me at the beginning, but they did it through many episodes over the years, and it got a little tiresome. It was just this strange physical fight between the main character, who's a human guy, and then this cartoon chicken, and it happened every time that these fight sequences between these two characters would go on for a very long time, and they were very violent, and every time this chicken character showed up, you knew that you were about to sit through at least 3 to 4 minutes of just this non-stop series of violent clashes between these two characters. And maybe for some people they remained funny throughout the years, but I definitely personally felt that I saw too many of them, and I was really happy when I feel like they finally retired this overused motif. So yeah, that definitely is something that springs to mind, something that I saw over and over.
Yeah, and I think this is something, quite common with, sitcoms, with cartoons, even with, stand-up, comedy, like a one comedian on a stage. If they have a certain style of comedy, they will always use this phrase over and over again. And sometimes it can definitely say what, we might say tiresome, tedious. It can be a little bit repetitive sometimes as well. Super. So I think we've definitely discussed a wide variety of different topics relating to toxic and non-toxic communication today. So I think that's probably all we've got time for. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening. We've discussed everything from cultural differences to comedy catchphrases, quirky compliments, and even constructive criticism. So maybe we'll just leave with you with some interesting, some useful language to go on your way. So if you want to sound more polite, you can just add, I'm afraid, possibly, maybe, is that okay? And Brandon, if you ever hear an overused joke, you can say,
Ha ha ha.
yes, which we very much hope is your reaction to listening to our podcast. So thanks, everyone. You've been listening to Emma and Brandon. Bye for now, and let's hope it won't be long time no hear before the next podcast episode here at UnifyHub. Thank you very much.